Alright, hi my dears. This video is going to be about Washington's presidency. So please make sure that if you have questions, you Edmodo me after you view it. If you want, you can take notes. Don't forget, hit the pause button. If I'm talking too fast, you can rewind and listen again if you didn't quite get something. And don't forget to come see me if you need some help. Okay? So, after the Constitution was created, they needed a president. So they unanimously decided to elect George Washington as our first official president under the Constitution. He was really reluctant to accept this honor because he was really nervous that he was going to look like a king, and he knew he was going to be setting a precedent, meaning that all future presidents are going to look towards him as an example. But he took it anyway. In order to avoid looking like a king, George Washington created departments to help him and advise him, experts in their fields. He created the State Department, which would handle foreign affairs. He created the War Department, obviously to manage military affairs, and that was Henry Knox. The Treasury Department, money, Alexander Hamilton, and the Attorney General, though not part of the cabinet, still a new position, and that was Edmund Randolph to advise him in legal matters. This way, he kind of has the best of the best at his table, helping him make these decisions and talking to him because he can't be an expert in all fields, and he needs those people to help advise him. So the person that comes into play majorly in the beginning is Alexander Hamilton because the U.S. is in a financial crisis. They are in trouble financially. They have a war and deficit spending. Deficit spending is spending when you don't have the money. Like people who use credit cards to buy everything, then all of a sudden their credit cards are maxed out and it's like $10,000 and they don't have any money. So note to self, don't use credit cards unless you have the cash to pay it right away because you don't want to go in debt. So that's what the U.S. did, and that was a problem. So Hamilton needs to create a plan. I have my notes. The U.S. is $77 million in debt. That's a whole lot of money now. Just imagine how much money that was during this time period. So the U.S. is in debt, and Hamilton thinks that Congress should begin paying off the national debt. Sorry, I need to think for a second. I'm having a brain fart. Right, the problem becomes is that the U.S. government got a lot of their money by issuing, selling government bonds. A bond is a certificate issued by the government in exchange for loans. So basically saying, if I had an extra $1,000 to spare, I would give it to the government, and they would give me a bond in return, a certificate saying that that's how much I got. And basically the government then promises to repay that $1,000 after X amount of years or whatever time period. They'll repay that $1,000, then plus some, so you'll gain interest on it too. So that sounds fine and dandy. Well, all of a sudden, the government's credit becomes really, really low, and the bonds become worthless. So all of these people who have these bonds decide to quickly sell them and get some sort of money back because they felt they weren't going to get a dime from the government because they had no money to pay them back. So they were just looking for something to get. So all of a sudden, when Hamilton says, we want to repay back all of these bonds, the people who bought these bonds at a really low price, known as the speculators, were going to make a fortune because they bought the bonds at such a low price, and now they were going to get repaid at full value plus the interest. Okay. Okay. Part 2. So part 1 is Hamilton wants to pay back all of the bonds. Part 2 says that Hamilton wants to also take over all state debt. He kind of wants the U.S. to have a clean slate or just one debt, and he says the national government should take over all the state debt. Well, southern states weren't too happy with this, and they said no, because they paid off their debt already, and they kind of felt like, why should we help these states that haven't done that yet? That's their problem. They have to figure it out. But they decided to make a compromise instead. The South agreed for the national government to pay off all state debt if the U.S. capital got moved to a southern state. So the U.S. capital got moved to Washington, D.C., and the state debts were taken over by the national government. Hamilton's next part of his plan was to create a national bank, the Bank of the U.S. Okay. It's a uniform currency, so everyone's using the same type of money, a safe place to deposit your money, and a place to get loans to help. Thomas Jefferson, who was the Secretary of State, he was in charge of those foreign affairs, was really against the Bank of the U.S. because he was a person who believed in that strict interpretation, that you can only do exactly what the Constitution says. If it's not written in the Constitution, that you cannot do it at all. Well, Hamilton was more of a loose interpretation, saying there's, you have to read in between the lines, there's a gray area for the Constitution, and he felt it was completely illegal for the Bank of the U.S. Next part of Hamilton's plan are high tariffs. A tariff, don't forget, is a tax on imported goods. The North was really in favor of these tariffs, but the South voted against it. The tariffs really only help the northern states, especially later on when the North industrializes, because it's encouraging people to buy the U.S.'s goods. Well, the South has that trade relationship with Great Britain, and that was just going to hurt them. So the South voted no on the tariffs. What's next? Okay. During Washington's presidency, one of the major events that happened was the Whiskey Rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion was a tax to be paid by whiskey producers. Because people thought this was unfair with this heavy tax, around 6,000 men marched to Philadelphia, known as the Whiskey Boys. They challenged federal authority, and Washington was able to put down the rebellion immediately. By Washington sending troops and sending force, showed that the national government could handle such rebellions and handle such problems, unlike Shays' Rebellion with the Articles of Confederation. So the Whiskey Rebellion really showed that the United States government under the Constitution had great strength compared to before. Please hold. I forgot there was so much more. Alrighty. Whew. I'm getting tired. Also, during Washington's presidency was the French Revolution. Washington really wanted to stay friendly and impartial during this, which is a vocabulary word, neutral. But there were some problems going on. Britain and France were seizing goods from American ships to prevent others from trading. And Great Britain was impressing their sailors, remember, taking their sailors off of their ship to serve in the British Navy. Just please keep holding. Sorry. All right, so the French Revolution is a 10-year revolution led by commoners to overthrow the monarchy. In France, long story short, is there are 3 estates. The top estate is the creme de la creme, the top of society, and it made up, and so few people were a part of it, but yet they had all the power. The third estate is could hardly afford bread and made up the majority of the population, so they finally revolted. The revolution turned violent, and thousands were killed in the Reign of Terror, including the king and queen. They were beheaded, like their heads were chopped off via guillotine, and it got pretty ugly. Republicans in the United States agreed with the act of revolution, kind of relating to what the U.S. went through, and the Federalists disagreed a lot because of the violence. I don't even know if this is still recording. I really hope it is. Oh, good. Phew, my computer went dead, or the screen went off. Sorry. So the Federalists disagreed because the violence was so strong. So this really is exemplified, once again, a tear between the Federalists and Republicans, dividing them even further. Okay. So the United States sends John Jay to England. Oh, you know what? That's what I did. I went the wrong way. I'm sorry. After the French Revolution, France and England go to war, and this is kind of the problems that I was just talking about before, with Britain and France seizing the ships, Britain's impressing the sailors. So the U.S. has had enough, and the U.S. sends John Jay to Great Britain to negotiate a treaty known as Jay's Treaty. The terms of the treaty are: the U.S. agrees to pay war debts to Great Britain, Britain pays for ships it sees, and the British withdraw of Northwest forts and stop supplying natives with weapons, and then to stop impressing sailors. Well, the treaty sounded all fine and dandy, but Great Britain kept impressing the sailors, and they kept supplying the Native Americans with weapons where they were being used to attack the Americans. So the American people weren't really impressed with Jay's Treaty and really disliked it and kind of mocked it. They hung effigies of Jay, really showing their dislike of the treaty and the negotiations. Can you see the little effigy? Okay, so they hang effigies of him, showing that they were unhappy. All right, so at the end of Washington's presidency, he gives a farewell address where he resigns in 1796. So he serves 2 years as president, setting the precedent for all future presidents that they're only to run 2 terms. He warned the country of a lot of different things, such as getting involved in foreign affairs and so forth. And he also advises against political parties, saying that nothing good comes from dividing yourself by identifying with a political party. It's just going to harm the country. He also warns again, or in his farewell address, talks about keeping a stable public credit, not going into debt. He also warns against permanent foreign alliances, meaning that he doesn't want the U.S. to say that their best friend is France or Great Britain, because if you create that permanent alliance, then you're going to be dragged into all of their problems, and that's not your problem. You need to worry about yourself. And he also talks about the importance of religion and morality, doing the right thing, being a good person, and so forth. So that, my friends, is Washington's presidency. All right, good night.